Hi everyone, welcome back to my training series entitled Understanding EMV. This is the 20th video in the series, and in this video we will be looking at step 8 of the EMV transaction. Okay, so this still falls under the EMV acquiring section, and let's just go straight into it. Let's start with a recap. We all know Bob is waiting at the teller, looking to complete his purchase. But where we are right now is that we know it's a chip transaction. It was a chip card inserted into a chip-capable device. We selected the virtual application or the virtual card, of the physical card. So we now know, which application on the card is going to be communicating with the terminal. This virtual card, this application, and the terminal then have a conversation where they exchange data. Excuse me. We then went through a process that the terminal conducts to verify that the card is genuine. We then went through a process where the terminal checks the conditions of the transaction to see if the transaction is genuine, if the transaction is valid, rather. Thereafter, the terminal processes CVM to check that the person attempting to use the card is an authorized cardholder. We then went into a phase called terminal risk management, where we checked a handful of items, just to assess the risk of the transaction. And this was in the last video, and so which brings us through to today's video, which is terminal action analysis. Okay, so what is terminal action analysis, or TAA? Okay, so this is a process where the terminal compares a set of conditions present in the transaction against two sets of rules. Okay, and based on the outcome of this comparison, right, it then suggests a course of action to the card. Remember, Order 66 says that the card is queen, which means the card is a final decision maker in an EMV transaction. So, when the terminal goes through its risk management, it assesses the various conditions, it then makes a suggestion to the card. And, obviously, we do understand the golden rule of EMV, and both the terminal and the card are bound to abide by the golden rule of EMV, which states that the strictest rule will always apply. Okay, so the conditions we want to compare are all the conditions we've spoken about in the last few videos, where the terminal had made a record of what was happening in a log called TVR, terminal verification results. Remember, we said think of it as a diary or the journal of the terminal. So during the transaction, it records certain things that are happening or during the course of the transaction, okay, from the terminal's perspective. And then we will compare these conditions against certain rules. And the rules are present in the issuer action codes. Issuer action codes are personalized on the card. Okay. The other set of rules are the terminal action codes, and the terminal action codes are personalized on the terminal. Okay, I spoke of a suggestion. So a suggestion is in the form of a request to the card to generate a specific application cryptogram. Okay, so let's get into a little bit more detail. Okay, please remember the golden rule, right? The strictest rule always applies, which means the terminal will always try to find the reason to decline a transaction first. If it cannot find the reason to decline a transaction, then it's going to look for a reason to send a transaction online. And only if it can't find a reason for the transaction to go online, will it suggest that we actually do an offline approval for the transaction. Okay. Terminal verification results, or TVR, tag 95. Remember, we've said this repeatedly, TVR is your best friend. Okay, and the TVR is a record of the preceding 5 steps that we've discussed in the previous 5 videos. Okay, so the 5 steps are the read application data step, the offline data authentication step, the processing restriction step, the CVM step, and the terminal risk management step. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about TVR, right? Let's get to know your best friend a little bit better. TVR is a 5-byte hex value. Okay, the important thing though is this line here, okay, where it says that TVR is a mirror image of the issue action codes in the terminal action code templates. Okay, now because they are like for like, it makes comparison so easy, right? So here's what TVR looks like. Okay, let's look at byte 1. Some of the things that will be recorded here will be, was data authentication or CAM, was it performed or not performed? Did SDA fail? Is the ICC data missing? Does the card appear on the hot card list? The DDA failed, the CDA failed. So basically, bits 3, 4, and 7 all sort of related, relate to bit 8. Okay, bits 2 and bits 1 are reserved for future use. Byte 2, we talk about chip card and terminal have different application versions. We did mention in the previous video that this is a legacy check, but it still forms part of TVR, so it's just something that needs to be included. We spoke about is the application expired? Is it effective? Requested service out of a card product. This refers to tag 907 application usage control. So is there something in application usage control that is either supported or not, that is present in this transaction that we need to make a note of? Okay, and what do we do in the case where we've got a new card? Okay, byte 3 talks a lot about CVM, so cardholder verification, successful or not. Is it unrecognized, or is it something that the card may not be aware of? Was the PIN trial limit exceeded? And then you've got other conditions here. We've got PIN entry required, but the PIN pad is not present, not working according to the terminal, right? Or PIN entry required, the PIN pad is present and working, but for some reason the cardholder never entered the PIN. So I mean, if these conditions happen, the terminal will actually flag it, right? And the other one was an online PIN entered here. Byte 4 talks about limits, so transaction flow limits in bit 8, bit 7, bit 6. Remember we spoke about the older implementations where the consecutive offline limits, lower and upper, were processed by the terminal and not the card. You don't see it too often these days, but it is in the TVR. So in those regions where a terminal does still do it, it will record it here. We then speak about transactions being selected randomly for online processing. You guys are familiar with the concept. And obviously the last one that we spoke about in the last video was around the merchant forcing the transaction online, using that special hotkey button on the terminal. Byte 5, generally speaks to things, generally after the transaction has returned back. So the transaction was sent online. There was a response back from the online system, and so byte 5 is usually where we record things that occurred after the initial submission online occurred, right? So things like issue authentication, was it successful or unsuccessful? And we'll speak a bit more about this in later videos when we speak about OMA leg 1 and leg 2. And obviously there's a couple of bits here about script processing, which can only happen after we've received the response back from the issuer host. Okay, you'll see that there's a couple of RFUs, but on the contact list specification, these actually have valid values in here. All right, so let's have a look at what the comparison looks like. So we've got, let's just take byte or TVR. What we're saying is that during the transaction, let's assume that DDA or CDA was not performed. Okay, so it's set to 1. Okay, so because it was not performed, and obviously SJ couldn't have failed, you will see that there's an entry there. I just put it in just an example purposes, but generally where data authentication was not performed, you'd find that SDA failed, DDA failed, and CDA failed with all of 0 values. Okay, ICC data missing. So in this transaction, we had certain pieces of data that were not supplied to the terminal by the card. So it happened in the transaction, right? And therefore the terminal made a note of it in the TVR. And like I said, once again, for example purposes only, let's assume that this card was reported stolen. The card number appeared on the exception list or on the hot card list, and the terminal that picked this up, right? So it flagged it as a yes, this actually happened, right? So, I mean, these are just sample values I put in for illustrative purposes, and the reason for that is when we compare, we can actually talk through the scenarios. So the first set of rules we need to look at are the terminal action codes. Remember, these are personalized on the terminal. It's normally a set of 3 rules. So you have a denial, online default, and we read it like this, right? So 000 means take no action. 010 means don't decline the transaction. Try to send it online, and if you can't send it online, don't worry about it. Let's let normal processing occur, right? And obviously 011 means don't decline a transaction. Try to send it online, but if you can't send it online, then you have to decline the transaction. Okay, we've covered these different scenarios already, but I'm just doing a refresher. So the most obviously the strictest rule here will be a 100, followed by, which is basically decline transaction, followed by a 011. So don't decline, go online. But if you can't go online, then you have to decline. Followed by don't decline, try to go online. But if you can't go online, then don't worry about it. And the most lenient one of all, obviously, is where you see a 000, take no action, right? The other set of rules are the issue action codes, which are personalized on the card itself, and during the data exchange between the card and terminal, these issue action codes are passed through a terminal, specifically for use during terminal risk management and terminal action analysis, right? So if we look at this, so let's just take a few examples. So what we're saying is, let's look at bit 8 here. So we know the condition says that in this particular transaction we could not perform data authentication for whatever reason, right? So it's set to 1, we did not perform it. Now let's look at the corresponding rules around this. Terminal action code says, in the event that data authentication was not performed, don't decline the transaction, send it online. But if we cannot make an online connection, if we cannot send a transaction online, then you have to decline the transaction. Okay. Issue action code says the same thing, right? So it says if this condition is present, which it is, don't decline it, try to send it online. But if you're unable to do so, then you have to decline it. Okay. Let's look at another one. ICC data missing, right? So in this case, when you're applying the golden rule, I mean, there isn't much to choose from. They both have the same level of strictness here, right? But the next one doesn't. So we've got something called ICC data missing, which we know is a legacy thing. We don't really use it anymore, and you should never really see a TVR value of ICC data missing anymore. But for just an example, in this transaction, let's assume that it's flagged as 1. So bit 6 says ICC data missing. Your terminal action code says don't decline the transaction, send it online. But if you can't send it online, then don't worry about it. Look at the other conditions for more effective risk management. Okay. Your issue action code says, as you can see, all 0. So it says, in the event that ICC data is missing, take no action. Now, if you look at the value of 000 and you compare it to the value here of the 010, we know that this one is stricter than this one. Okay, which means we would always give this action precedence over this, which means we would always now try to send it online, and only if we can't send it online do we ignore it. Right? Where this is not lenient, we say ignore it completely. Card appears in terminal exception file is a good example for us to use, right? So let's assume in the transaction that the card number was present on the hot card list. right? We know it is user condition. It's been flagged in TBR. Let's look at the rules around us now. So if you look at terminal action code, the terminal action code says, in this scenario, don't decline the transaction, send it online. But if you can't send it online, then you have to decline it. Okay, decline the transaction. If you look at the corresponding rule on the issue action codes, okay, you see that this is a lot more stricter. So this says, in the event the card appears on the terminal exception file, decline it offline, decline the transaction immediately. Okay. If you compare this rule with this rule, okay, which is the more strict rule, which is the stricter rule? So obviously, this one is. So should this a condition be flagged in the transaction, we would always expect the transaction to decline, because this supersedes this rule where it says only decline after trying to go online. This one says decline immediately. Don't even attempt to go online. Okay, so that's how you would read it. You line by line take the condition, compare to the rule, and find which is the stricter rule, right? And that is the rule that must be applied as part of terminal action analysis. Okay, so once a terminal does all of this, okay, it will formulate a decision that it would like to see, right? And it will then send this decision to the card, and it will ask it to generate one of the following cryptograms. Okay, so the strictest one being decline a transaction, which we refer to as an AAC, right? So the terminal will ask the card to generate an AAC, or an application authentication cryptogram, okay, indicating an offline decline. Okay, if it found no conditions in the transaction to decline the transaction, right, it would then look for any condition where so basically now, so an AAC would be a 100 somewhere. Somewhere in the comparison it picked up a 100. Let's assume that it didn't find anything. It would then look for a 011, and thereafter 010, where it says don't decline a transaction. But so the terminal says I couldn't find a reason to decline the transaction, but I have found a reason for us to actually go online. And if it does, it will ask the card to please generate an ARQC cryptogram. An ARQC refers to, or is translated into, an authorization request cryptogram. Okay, indicates an online transaction requesting an authorization requesting authorization response from the issuing bank's host system. And obviously, the last thing it could ask for would be a TC, which is an approval, right? So let's assume that the terminal could not find a matching condition to ask for a decline. It could not find a matching condition to ask for a transaction to be routed online. It would then by default say, okay, because I couldn't find the first two, by default, I'm going to ask the card to generate a transaction certificate, okay, which is a decision to approve the transaction offline. So what we will do is in one of the later videos, when we actually go more in depth into the first gen AC section, right, or the first gen AC step. Okay, we'll have a closer look at the actual terminal command and ICC response. So basically, it's that lower level transaction log, where we can, using a specialized tool, actually look at the conversation between the card and terminal. So we will be covering that in a bit more detail in a later video. So yeah, just if you are eager to see that will be discussed later on. Okay, but basically this brings us to the end of the terminal action analysis phase, right? So the output of this is the terminal requesting the card to generate one of three cryptograms: an offline decline, AAC, a go online request, which is an ARQC, or a default to let's approve this transaction offline. Okay, so this brings us to the end of step 8 of the EMV transaction, which is terminal action analysis. in the next video, we are going to look at something called card action analysis, okay, which is similar to terminal action analysis, but from the cards perspective. And thereafter, when you look at the video thereafter, we'll actually look at the first gen AC step of the transaction, where we will look at a little where we were looking in a bit more detail around the conversation between the terminal and the card, and how the cryptograms are requested and responded to. But for now, we've completed step 8, and in the next video we're going to be covering step 9, which is card action analysis. So thank you very much for spending the time with me, and I look forward to catching you guys in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Yeah, cheers and bye bye.